All right, Shabbos, say good morning, a good chodesh to everyone. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz. New month, new sponsors, Baruch Hashem. To thank Adam and Yudit Benzev for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in honor of their children, Jake, Sarina, and Rosie. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Baruch and Bracha Rifkin, for the yahrzeit of Selim Rifkin, Shalom ben Harav Ruvain, whose yahrzeit is today. We hope that the neshama has an aliyah and the family a nechama. And to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Sherry and Alan Steinmetz from New York, wishing a very happy birthday to our dear daughter-in-law, Allison Steinmetz, very sweet, and wishing many more in good health and happiness. And the Plunka family, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Yosef ben Yaakov Yosef Atzadik, whose yahrzeit is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. We hope that in the merit of the Talmud Torah, that Yosef Atzadik will continue to be a Meles Yosher for all of Klal Yisrael. And also with that, let us begin. Sammy, better? I rearranged it today. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Samech Aleph 61. And we are picking up on Samech Amud Beis. I believe we left off with today Amr Rabbi Chanina Ketorah Shechafna, which is 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. So just to reorient ourselves for a moment, we left off yesterday with the very interesting machlokes in Rabbi Yehuda, or I should say differently. We left off yesterday after learning a Mishnah, and in the Mishnah we learned that the order of Yom Kippur, the order of the Yom Kippur service, is absolute necessity in order to maintain the integrity of that service. Meaning that if you were to go ahead and do the different parts of the avodah, but you were to not follow the order, that would compromise the effectiveness of the avodah. We then saw in Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Nehemiah as to what that concept applies to. Rabbi Yehuda said, pretty much it applies to the avodah done inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The way he phrased it was, B'dvarim ha'na'asim b'bigdei lavan mibifnim. Which again, as we pointed out yesterday, is a bit repetitive, because anything done mibifnim, anything done inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim is automatically what? Done b'bigdei lavan. But Rabbi Yehuda holds, halacha l'maisa, only the avodah done inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it is ma'akiv if you go ahead and you do it out of order. Rabbi Nehemiah said, interestingly enough, anything you do b'bigdei lavan. So whether you do b'bigdei lavan mibifnim, mibachutz, halacha l'maisa, if you disrupt the order, ultimately that is ma'akev. So we saw the Gemara continue to discuss that machlokes, and with that let's pick up. It says Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina says as follows: Ketores shechafna, kodem shchitaso shalpar. If the Kohen Gadol does chafina, so remember again, what's chafina? They would bring out a shovel of ketores from the base Avatinas, the Avatinas chapter, and the Kohen Gadol would take essentially a handful of the ketores. That taking of the handful is called chafina. If the Kohen Gadol were to do chafina before the shchita of the par, lo asa v'lo klum, his actions are meaningless, because I will say why. He has gone ahead and disrupted the order. So Kiman, whose opinion does this? Because most remember again, one is supposed to shech the par before you go ahead and do the chafina. So you've disrupted the proper order. Therefore, again, you've invalidated the service. And I will say, now remember again, where is chafina done? Where is chafina done? Outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Yet disruption of the order will invalidate the service. So Kiman, whose opinion does this reflect? The Lo Rabbi Yehuda. They both say this is obviously not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Di Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar kiksiva chuka b'dvarim hanasim b'bigdei lavan mibifnim hu dichsiva. Because let's remember again, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is, it is only avodah done inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim where the order matters. But anything done outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the order is not ma'akev. Yet here we're seeing avodah being done outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, i.e. chafina, and order matters. So obviously it doesn't reflect the view of Rabbi Yehuda, to which the Gemara says something very interesting. I feel the team Rabbi Yehuda. No, it could even be reflective of the view of Rabbi Yehuda. How so? The Gemara says, Tzorech pnim kipnim dami. Something that is necessary for the order of the inner service, of the Kodesh HaKadoshim service, is considered to be like Kodesh HaKadoshim service. As Rabbi say, why do you do chafina for which service? Which service? Ketores. Where's Ketores done? in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Therefore, the Gemara says that essentially, the Gemara is broadening Rabbi Yehuda's statement. That when Rabbi Yehuda says, only avoda done bebigdei lavan mibifnim, the order is ma'akev, that's not only actual avoda done bifnim, but anything necessary for the avoda bifnim is treated like avoda bifnim. And therefore, again, for example, chafina, which is a necessary prerequisite for the Ktores service, which is performed inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, will be governed by the same strictures as avoda in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Namely, that if you go ahead and you disrupt the order of the chafina, ultimately you've compromised the avoda. Interesting. So Tanan, so we'll say, remember, learn in the Mishnah, if halacha l'maisa, while doing the blood applications of the blood inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, nishbach adam, the blood spilled. So what's halacha? Yavi dam acher v'yachzor v'yazeh betchila mibifnim. Then halacha l'maisa, you have to start again. Let's remember again, there was machlokes in Mishnah, but the Tanakama held that essentially, if blood spilled in the middle of the blood applications, then halacha l'maisa, you have to start from the beginning. Now the Gemara says, well, if you now both say, now remember, in order to start from the beginning, what do you have to do? You have to get more blood, right? How do you get more blood? You have to shecht another animal, which means you're going to be shechting another par. Well, 1 second. If you're shechting another par, both say, what did we just say before? We just said that halacha l'maisa, the chafina has to happen before the par. So if you're going ahead and shechting another par, then what should really have to happen as well? You should have to do a chafina again as well. In other words, both say, this is fascinating. If you hold that order is ma'akev, then in a case where the blood spilled, and now you have to shecht another par, you should probably have to do chafina again as well to maintain the proper order. So the Gemara says, let's read inside. If in the middle of the blood applications your dama par spilled, you have to shecht another par. Now if it's true, like I really said, then because remember, you're going to both say chafina has to come after shchita sapar. So if you have to shecht another par, then you should have to go ahead and what? And do chafina again as well. To which the Gemara says, top of Samach Aleph, Pikitoris lo kamairi. Okay, enochinami, you may be right, but Allah chalamaisa, the Gemara is not talking about Kitoris, right? The Mishnah wasn't talking about Kitoris. Kitoris is kind of its own animal, not included in the discussion over here. Amar Ula. Ula said, Sa'ir sheshachtu kodem matan damo shalpar, lo asav lo klum. So Ula said that if you go ahead and you shecht the sa'ir before the blood application of the par, your act is meaningless. Because let's remember again, one of the things that we've seen is that along with the halacha concerning the need to maintain the proper order of the Yom Kippur service is the statement that if you disrupt the order, essentially again, the avoda you've done out of order is a meaningless avoda. So therefore again, the Gemara says, if you shechted the sa'ir before you went ahead and you did the blood applications of the par, lo asav lo klum, such an act is absolutely meaningless. So the Gemara says, Tanan, hiktim dam hasar le dam hapar, yachsor v'yazemi dam hasar achar dam hapar. But 1 second, we learned before, but we actually had this Gemara 3 days ago. The Gemara said, if you want to remember, the proper order for the blood applications as well is to first do the dam hapar, and then do the dam hasar. But remember the case, what happens if you went ahead and you did dam hasar first? We had this case where you got mixed up with the blood. Let's say you went ahead and you offered up the dam hasar first, no problem. Yachsor v'yazeh midam hasar achar dam hapar. Just do it again. But this time going ahead and sprinkling of the dam hasar for the dam hapar. V'misa yachsor v'yishchot mi baile. But shouldn't you not have to shecht the dam hasar, the sar altogether, to which in order to preserve the order? Tirgama Ula, no. Ula says we're talking about blood applications. In other words, the blood is already there. You didn't disrupt the order of the shchita. We're just talking about where you disrupted the order of the blood applications in the heichal. So where you disrupted the order of the blood applications, you don't have to start shechting any new animals. You still have blood. You just have to go ahead and redo it so that now the blood application is taking place in order. V'chein Amar Rabbi Afas, Good. So remember again, the Mishnah began by saying that halacha l'maisa, what is true inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, right? What is true inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim is true in the Heichal, is true in the Mizbeach Hazav, that ultimately, again, order is necessary. That's what the Gemara said. So now says, the lashon of the Mishnah was, v'chein beheichal, v'chein mizbeach hazav, shekulan kapara bifnei atzman. So we'll say, so remember, there's two issues over here. Issue number one is that order is important, although that discussion of order is subject to the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemiah. And the next piece ultimately is this concept of kapara being a unit. So we'll say there's two issues in the Mishnah. Issue number one is order, right? Seder. That then becomes the machlokes in the Gemara Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nechemiah. Is Seder ma'akev? Now the answer is Seder ma'akev? The answer is yes. The machlokes is what? When, right? Everybody subscribes to the principle that Seder is ma'akev. They just have a machlokes as to when you apply that principle. Rabbi Yehuda says Seder is only ma'akev inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Rabbi Nechemiah says Seder is ma'akev any avodah the Kohen wears big day lavan. The second discussion in the Mishnah is what happens if you have a disruption in the avodah in the middle of a seder. So the paradigmatic example of this is you're doing your blood applications, and what happens? The blood spills. You drop the bowl, Kohen Gadol drops the bowl, the blood spills. Okay, I have to shecht another animal and bring new blood. What's the shaila? Do I pick up where I left off, or do I go ahead and start from the beginning? That's the machlokes. We'll say so. That we're now going to segue into that second machlokes about what happens when the avodah is disrupted. Do you pick up where you left off, or do you start again? Now, before we do that, let's just close out the machlokes. So we'll say, who do we paskin like? In other words, we understand from the Mishnah that Seder is ma'akev. The shaila now is going to be what's ma'akev. So we'll also listen to this. So the Rambam in Perek Hey, Halacha Aleph, right? It says as follows. Kol avodos she'oved bebigdei lavan bifnim beheichol tzarich la'asosan ala seder shebe'arnu b'im hikdim bahen ma'aseh lechavero lo asav lo klum. So we'll say the Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, that although we always try to follow the order for everything, the only time that Seder is ma'akev, right, and would require you to repeat the avodah is for avodah that is done bebigdei lavan bifnim, inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Bifnim beheichal. According, it's a little bit of a hybrid shita. The Rambam holds that it's any avodah done in the white clothing, inside of the Beis Hamikdash. That I both say right? Say anything done inside of the Beis Hamikdash in white clothing. If you disrupt the Seder, you have to repeat it again. I both say, interestingly enough, what's the only avodah done in white clothing that's not done inside the Heichal? Excellent. The spilling out of the Shirayim. Right? That's the only thing that's done. And in fact, we're going to see, we already started this discussion, is the pouring out of the Shirayim in general an avodah which is ma'akev or not. So the Rambam kind of gave it away a little bit. Obviously, it's not ma'akev, right? So again, we pass essentially like Rabbi Nechemiah, that any avodah done in white clothing, by definition, must be done on the Seder, and if you do it outside of the Seder, it is ma'akev, you would have to repeat. Good. Well, we'll see more of that as we go on. So let's go back there. So v'chein beheichal v'chein mizbeach. Tar Rabban, what's the Gemara? It's a brayso. V'chiper es mikdash hakodesh. So we'll say the pause. V'chiper es mikdash hakodesh. V'es oil moed. V'es mizbeach yichaper. V'yala kohanim v'al am hakal yichaper. So we'll say that this is the pasuk. Now, the subject of this pasuk is the so'ir. Right? That what does the Sa'ir atone for? The Sa'ir atones for the Mikdash, the Kodesh. So we'll see what all of this means. Now we're going to see, let's see the Gemara, I'm sorry. So says the Gemara, Mikdash HaKodesh, the Sa'ir will be Mechaper for the Mikdash HaKodesh. What does that refer to? So the Gemara says, Zeh lifnai v'lifnim. So we're going to see that one of the things that the Sa'ir goes ahead and atones for is inadvertent tumah transgression. That if you entered into any of the spaces of the mikdash in a state of tumah, unknowingly, unknowingly, the Sa'ir of Yom Kippur has the ability to atone for that. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Zelifnai v'lifnim. Rashi says, Kiper b'damam halalu al tuma she'ira lifnai v'lifnim em nichnas adam sham b'tuma ve'ein bo yedia b'sof aval have bo yedia b'tchila v'afina mikrai. So I'll say again, so Rashi gets into a whole yisod over here, yedia b'tchila, yedia b'sof, when you knew, if you knew. We're not going to get into that now. Point over here is that for our purposes, the Sa'ir has the ability to atone for inadvertent tumah. Inadvertent tumah where? Interestingly enough, we're going to see pretty much in any of the precincts of the Mikdash. So when it says v'chiper, the Sa'ir will atone for inadvertent tumah. First place it atones for is Mikdash HaKodesh. What does Mikdash HaKodesh refer to? Kodesh Kadashim. You inadvertently entered into the Kodesh HaKadashim in a state of tumah. Ohel Moed, what does Ohel Moed refer to? Zehechal. This refers to the Mikdash in general. If you entered into the Mikdash in a state of tumah, Mizbeach is Mizbeach, Kimashma'o, Yichaper, Elu Azaros. This refers to the various courtyards. If you entered into the various courtyards inadvertently in a state of tumah, HaKohanim, who does it atone for? Kohanim, Kimashma'on. Kohanim means Kohanim. Amakal, who's Amakal? Elu Yisrael. This refers to Klal Yisrael. So Rabbi says, interestingly enough, this Sa'ir is mechaper for inadvertent tumah, for Kohanim, for Yisraelim, and lastly, Yechaper Elu HaLeviyim. Yechaper refers to the Leviyim. The Gemara says, Hushvu kulam lekapara achos. The Torah equates all of these individuals that they could achieve one level of Torah. Shekulan miskaprin bisar ha'mishbesir mishtaliach bishar averos tivei Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll say, interestingly enough, that they all have the ability to be atoned through the sir mishtaliach, also for other averos. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Hushvu kulan u'b'hai yechaper basra kohanim leviyim v'yisraelim b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Efshar lashvosan shari mechaper al kohanim v'asar hanasa b'fnim al Yisrael ube'eza kapara hushvu malamet shekulam miskapem bevidu shal ser mishtalech b'shar averos Rabbi Yehuda. Supposed to listen to this. So interestingly enough, the seir that is offered up inside the seir LaHashem, that has the ability to go ahead and atone for tumah. But I will say, interestingly enough, the transgressions of tumah are not the same for Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim. Why not? Why not? Because each group has different levels of access inside of the Mikdash. So the Seir LaHashem has the ability to offer up kapara for inadvertent tumah, but each group, Kohanim, Yisraelim, and Levim, have their own kapara. I will say, interestingly enough, the end of the pasuk seems to unite Kohanim, Levim, and Yisraelim in kapara. So what provides uniform kapara? Ultimately, again, for all Jews, that's the Seir LaAzazel, right? That's what we call the Seir HaMishtaleach, right? The Seir that is sent out and ultimately pushed over the cliff. That Seir provides uniform kapara for all of Klal Yisrael for Shar Averos. For other Averos, again, we'll discuss the atonement scope of the par as we go on. Rabbi Shimon, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Keshem Shedam Hasar Nasa B'fnim Mechaper Al Yisrael B'tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. The same way that the blood of the seir that's offered up in the Mikdash has the ability to be mechaper for Klal Yisrael for tumah infractions, kach dam hapar mechaper ala kohanim b'tumas Mikdash v'kadashav. So I will say, interesting enough, Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon says that the dam of the Sa'ir atones for the tumah of Klal Yisrael, of Yisraelim. And so, therefore, the dam hapar is mechaper ala kohanim b'tumas Mikdash v'kadashav. It is the dam hapar that achieves kapara for the kohanim. Ukeshem shevidui shel sar mishtaleach mechaper al Yisrael b'shar averos. And the same way that the vidui that is recited on the sir mishtaleach has the ability to mechaper for Klal Yisrael and other averos. Kach vidui shel par mechaper ala kohanim b'shar averos. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Shimon's position is the Sa'ir is for Yisrael, the par is for kohanim. So we'll say an interesting machlokis over here. Rabbi Huda understands that the Sa'ir has the ability to take care ultimately again of the tumah for each group, but each group in its own way. That's the Sar Bifnim, and the Seir B'chutz has the ability to take care of the rest of the Averos for Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Nechemia, or when I say Klal Yisrael, kind of living in Israelim, Rabbi Shimon holds that halacha l'maisa, pretty much Kohanim are taken care of for both for Tumah as well as by Shar Averos for the Par, and everyone else is taken care of through the Sa'ir. Okay, Tarabanon, V'chila mechaper as hakodesh. The pasuk says, ultimately, again, its atonement will be complete inside of the kodesh. Zeh lifnai v'lifnim. This refers ultimately again to the avodah done inside of the kodesh hakadoshim. Oel moed zehecha, that refers to the Beis Hamikdash. Mizbeach refers to the mizbeach kimashmo. Melamed shakulan kapara bifnei atzman. It teaches us that each group achieves a level of kapara on their own. Mikan amru. Both say from here we learn something very important. And both say this is our topic, right? This is really our primary topic. Nasan mixas matano shebifnim, v'nishpach adam. If the Kohen Gadol is doing the blood applications inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then the blood spills, v'nishpach adam, yavi dam acher, v'yaschil betchila b'matano shebifnim. That if the blood spills in the middle of the avoda, inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you have to bring new blood. And what do you have to do with that blood? What do you have to do? You have to start again. You have to start again. Right? Yaschil betchila b'matano shebifnim. Now remember, you don't have to start all over again, all the blood applications. You just have to start again what? Whatever you're currently engaged in, that has to begin from the beginning. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, first wide line, no, you don't have to start again. You just have to go ahead and pick up from where you left off. Supposed to now the Gemara is going to go through all of the different stages in the avoda. So the first example the Gemara gave was where the blood spills in the middle of the avoda bifnim. Right, the blood spills in the middle of the interior avoda. So what happens? Machlokes. First opinion says. Then halacha lemaisa Tanakama holds, which we're going to see is Rabbi Meir. Tanakama holds you have to begin the whole unit again. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say no, you have to begin again. Just pick up where you left off. Next. What happens if you finished the interior blood? So we'll say in this case now, I've finished, for example, let's say the damasayr inside. So it's done. It's done. Now I will say now in this case, I've finished the blood application in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. After I finished, I've spilled the blood. So I have no blood now left for the matanos on the kapores, or on the parochas, I should say, on the curtain. So what do you do in that case? Yavi dam achar v'yaschel betchila b'matanon shebehechal. No problem. Problem, but we could solve it. Shecht another animal, take the blood, and begin to do the blood applications ultimately in the heichal. And I was about to say, meaning, if you spill blood in between avodos, then what? Obviously, you don't have to repeat anything. You just have to shecht the new animal before you begin the next set of blood applications. Next, nasan mikzas matanon shebehechal v'nishpach adam. What happens if you began the blood applications inside of the heichal, towards the parochas, and then the blood spilled? Yavi dam acher v'yaschil betchila behechal. Ultimately, again, what do? You go ahead and you shecht another animal and pick up where you and start the unit again. Rabbi Elazar Shimon Omrim eino maschel ela mimakom shepasak. No, you don't go ahead and do that. Rather, again, you pick up where you left off. So we'll say it's the same machlokes. All the Bryce is doing is illustrating the machlokes at every stage. If you spill the blood in the middle of the blood applications, do you pick up where you left off, or do you start again? Tanakama is saying whenever you spill blood in the middle of a unit, you go back and you start again with the new blood. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon saying you pick up from where you left off. Next, if you finish the matanos inside of the mikdash, and then the blood spilled. I remember again, what are you in the middle of? Right now, you're in between the blood applications on the parochas, on the curtain, and the blood applications on the mizbeach hazav, on the incense altar, right? The mizbeach haketores. That's what you're in between over here. So if the blood spilled in between that, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Shecht another animal, take the blood, and begin again, and then begin the blood applications on the mizbeach hazav. Nasan mikzas matanoshav mizbeach. What happens if you went ahead and you started the blood applications on the golden mizbeach, v'nishpach adam, and now the blood spilled? Yavi dam acher v'yaschel betchila b'matanos hamizbeach. Shecht another animal, bring new blood, begin all over again with the blood applications on the mizbeach. Rabbi Elazar b'Shimon Omrim mimakum shepasak Hu Mascha. Rabbi Elazar shouldn't say no. Just pick up from where you left off. Good. Gamar Matanon Sheben Mizbeach. We'll say now. Let's say you finish the blood applications on the Mizbeach Hazav. V'nishbach Hadam. Now, remember again. What comes after the blood applications on the golden Mizbeach? What comes after that? Pouring out of the shirayim. So watch this. This is actually the easiest case because Gamar Matanon Sheben Mizbeach V'nishbach Hadam. Divrei hakol lo ma'akvi. So I'll say. So remember again, you finished, right? This must be a good feeling for the Kohen Gadol. You've finished all of the blood applications in the Kodesh Hakadoshim, in the Heichal, towards the Tiparoches, towards the curtain, on the Mizbeach Hazav. You still have leftover blood. Remember again, it's the combined blood of the Damapar Dama. So you already combined it before the blood application on the Mizbeach Hazav. You're walking outside to the Mizbeach to pour the blood down the drain. And what happens? You trip, you drop the bowl. What's the halacha? Divrei akol lo ma'aki. I will say, which makes sense. In other words, no one's going to say what? Shecht another animal, get the blood so you have leftovers, right? So if you don't have leftovers, you don't have leftovers. We'll say, by the way, the same way, although I can't imagine it's possible for it to happen this way, but let's say the Kohen Gadol ended up using up all of the blood, right, in let's say the blood applications. Again, it doesn't seem possible unless the Kohen has like a huge hand, right? There's something, but Pashtos, there's no way you're using up all, or he's a very liberal sprinkler, right? So again, it's Pashtos. But again, if it were to happen, if there's no shiraim, there's no shiraim. So if he dropped the blood, right? He spilled the blood. Halacha l'maisa again. There's no shiraim. So again, you trip, you drop the blood. You don't have to check another. Everyone agrees it's not ma'akev. So Rabbi Yochanan. We'll say, so the fundamental machlokes here between the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon is when you go ahead and you have disruption in the middle of the blood service. Now you shecht another animal, you get new blood. Halacha l'maisa, where do you pick up from? Do you pick up from where you left off? Or that's Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, or do you start again? That is the Tanakama. And now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, Ushnehem mikra echad darshu. Interestingly enough, they both dash in the same psukim. What are they dashing? So the Gemara says, listen to this. Midam chatas akipurim achas bashana. The pasuk says, from the dam of the chatas of Yom Kippur, once a year. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Meir is the Tanakama, right? So the Tanakama holds that whenever you have a disruption in the blood service, you start again from the beginning of the unit. Rabbi Meir savar chatas achas amarti lecha v'lo shtei chatos. So Rabbi Meir says that halacha l'maisa, there's one chatos. There's one chatas. Look at Rashi. It's right across. Chatas achas amarti lecha liskaper hakapara ba v'lo la'asos kapara achas mishtei behemus. Kapara through blood applications must be accomplished through one animal. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, if you start the blood service and what happens? It gets disrupted because you spill the blood. What do you have to do? You have to start again. Why? Because you must have an entire blood service that takes place through one chatas. One chatas, not half from this one, half from that one. The entire blood service must be from one chatas. Chatas achas amarti lecha v'lo shtei chatos. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Savri, chitui echad amarti lecha v'lo shnei chituin. Now, listen to this. Rabbi Shimon say you can only have one blood application, not two blood applications. Rabbi say, in other words, interestingly enough, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon will say, what's the problem with starting over again? What's the problem with starting over? It turns out that you had more than one blood application. Both say, so think about this in just a moment. Let's say the Kohen Gadol is in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And remember again, he does achas lamala, sheva lamata. Right? So what happens? He does the achas lamala, trips, spills the blood. So Rabbi Elazar and Shimon say, if you're going to tell, now again, obviously it's the shecht a new animal, he has to get new blood. If he starts again from the beginning and does the achas lamala, both say, turns out, was it achas lamala? No, shtayim lamala. But that's not the halacha. It's not shtayim lamala, it's only achas lamala. So that's the machlokes over here. And I will say everything is how you dash in the pasuk. Everyone's in the pasuk is midam chatas akipurim achas bashana. So the Tanakama will say achas bashana means only one animal for the entire service. So you have a disruption in the middle of the blood application, shecht a new animal, start from the beginning, so that the entire blood service is from one animal. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, achos means you can only do one act of sprinkling. But if you start from the beginning, it turns out you're doing more than one act of sprinkling. Therefore, they hold halacha l'maisa, pick up from where you left off. Tanya, Amar Rebbe, Li chalak Rabbi Yaakov Belugin. Both said this is very interesting. So Rebbe said, that Rabbi Yaakov made a distinction for me between the blood applications of Yom Kippur and the applications of both blood and oil by the Mitzorah. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Li chalik Rabbi Yaakov belugin, li nasan Rabbi Yaakov chilik, belug shemen shel Mitzorah, shelo hushvu lematan damu shel Kippur. So remember again, interesting enough, as we're going to see in just a moment, there are applications of oil onto the Mitzorah as well. So Rabbi says, you might have thought that all applications are treated the same way. Halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yaakov made a distinction for me between the applications of Yom Kippur and the applications of the Mitzorah. Just read the rest of Rashi. V'shonali lo nechlu kuramei Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon ba'avodas hachalukos bo sheva hazol shebifnim umatan bahonos. Because we also remember again by Mitzorah, you have blood applications ultimately inside of the Beis Hamikdash, and then applications on the big toe, the earlobe, the thumb of the Mitzorah. That even Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, who by Yom Kippur, they say when there's a disruption, you pick up from where you left off, will agree that by Mitzorah, halacha l'maisa, you have to go ahead and start from the beginning. Now Rashi says, why mishamu maschil? He says, dichsiv, lug echad shemen, lug echad amarti l'cha liyos hakaparabo, v'lo shnei lugin. The hasam hu de'ika l'midrash chitui echad amarti l'cha, aval hacha lekka l'meimach. You're supposed to listen to this. Here we go. Says the Gemara. So Rabbi says that Rabbi Yaakov made a distinction for me that the applications of Mitzorah are not treated the same of Yom Kippur. Is that true? V'lo. Vatanya, we learned, Nasan mixas matano shebifnim. If you went ahead and you did some of the blood applications for the Mitzorah, this was sprinkled on the curtain towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If you did some of the applications, v'nishpach halug, and then ultimately again the lug spilled, yavi lug acher. You bring another lug. V'yaschil betchila b'matano shebehechal, and you begin all over again. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer mimakom shepasa kumaschil. So we'll say, so it doesn't appear that Rebbe is correct, because Rebbe said that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar don't disagree that in the case of Mitzorah, if there's spillage, you start again. Well, here it's pretty explicit that they're arguing in this case as well. And they're saying that if there's spillage in the middle of the application for the Mitzorah, that you would start all over again. I'm sorry, that you would pick up where you left off. To which the Gemara says, if you finish the applications of the Mitzorah in the Heichal, and then the lug spilled, you go ahead and you bring a new lug and begin the next section. So the Gemara said, what happens if you began the applications? This is on the Mitzorah himself. The nishbach halug, and the lug spilled. You have to begin again. That's the Tanakama, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omrim, mimakom shepasa kumaschil. Rabbi Elazar should say, no, you pick up from where you left off. If you began the applications on the Mitzorah, the nishbach halug, and the lug ultimately spilled, divrei hakol matanos harosh lo ma'akvos. I will say now, interestingly enough, after the applications on the thumb and the big toe and the earlobe of the Mitzorah, you would take the remaining oil and smear it on his head. Everyone agrees that process is not ma'akev. So if there was spillage before that occurred, you would not have to get a new lug. So the Gemara will say, the point over here is Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon subscribe to the same idea by Mitzorah as they do by Yom Kippur. Namely, if there's a disruption in the application, what do? Pick up from where you left off. To which the Gemara says, right, Rabbi said that over a little bit wrong. Ema lishan Rabbi Yaakov alugin. That Rabbi Yaakov told me the same machlokas that applies by Yom Kippur applies by Mitzorah as well. Amar matanas harosh ema akvas. We'll say this now that we mentioned Mitzorah. Let's talk about this. If you have any remaining oil after the various applications of the Mitzorah, you rub the remaining oil on his head. But ultimately, again, the placement of the oil on the Mitzorah's head is not ma'akev. So Gemara says, my time. What's the reason for that? Maybe you'll say because the pasuk calls it nosar, it calls it the leftover of the shemen, which tells you that it's leftover. It's not really part of the primary avoda. So we'll say, maybe you'll say, remember again, this pasuk nosar min mincha is talking about the shirayim from the kmitza. The Rabbi said that the halacha is if the shirayim are not there at the time the kmitza is offered, then halacha lamaisa, the kmitza is invalid. So you see, just because something is called nosar doesn't mean that it's not necessary. Shiny hasam dechsiv umiyeser v'hanosar. But we'll say it's different over here by the oil of the head, because the Torah uses the lashon umiyeser. So not only is it noser miyeser, it's extra. It's fundamentally extra, to the point that the avodah of placing the remaining oil on the head of the nazir is not ma'akev. Rabbi Yochanan says, Amud Beis will say, Rabbi Yochanan, Asha Mitzora, Sheshachtu Shalo Lishmo. What happens if you shechted the ashram of the Mitzora Shalo Lishmo? Now, say, what does this mean? Take a look at the top Rashi, Samech Aleph Amud Beis. Asha Mitzora Shalo Lishmo, Kigon L'Shem Ola, O L'Shem Shlamim. Suppose say in this case over here, you shechted the ashram of the Nazir, and you shechted it L'Shem Ola or L'Shem Shlamim. So you shechted it for the wrong designation. Ava Amar Mar, Kavazvachim Shenishchetu Shalo Lishman Ksherin Ela Shalo Alu L'Bailim L'Shem Chova. So we'll say in general, if you shecht a carbon Shalo Lishman, the carbon itself is effective, right? Meaning it's a valid carbon. What's the only problem? It has not gone ahead and fulfilled my obligation. So now remember, the Mitzora, as part of his purification process, has to bring an asham. What happened over here? The asham was brought, but it was not brought L'Shem Asham Nazir. Instead, it was just brought L'Shem Ola or L'Shem Shlamim. So the carbon is effective, but the Nazir does not fulfill his obligation through it. So Banu L'Machlokes, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Lazar. Banu L'Machlokes, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon. Both say this is part of the Machlokes in Rabbi Meir, the Tanakama, and Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon. How so? Both say, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, actually, let's see. Rabbi Meir de Amar Yavi Acher. Rabbi Meir in general, who says that when there is a disruption in the blood applications, you have to start from the beginning. So Yavi Acher v'yascheh b'tchila, hachenami Yavi Acher v'yishchot. So it's according to Rabbi Meir, halacha l'maisa, if you brought the Asham Mitzora, but you didn't bring in L'Shem Asham Mitzora, you brought it L'Shem something else, so Rabbi Meir will say you have to bring another Asham Mitzora, you have to begin again from the beginning of that particular stage in the process. You would have to bring another carbon. Or the Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Sha'omri mimakom shepasak mishamu maschil, hacha ein lo takana. Rabbi said this is very interesting. But according to Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon, who hold that when there is a disruption in the blood service, you don't begin again, but rather what? You pick up from where you left off. Here, you're going to be stuck. Now, why are you going to be stuck? Take a look at Rashi. Right across in Rashi. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Damri mimakom shepasak mishamu maschil, Alma lo amar kiman delesa damya, hachinami chashibahi v'afshar lagomra ba'acher. They both say this is fascinating. This is incredible. You see, what Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon say is like this. We'll say what's really the fundamental machlokes. Think about this. Kohen Gadol's in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's supposed to do achas lamalo and sheva lamata with the damapar, for argument's sake. He does achas lamala, achas lamata. He trips. The blood spills. What does he have to do now? What do you have to do? What do you have to do? According to everyone, what do you have to do? New par, new dam. So we'll say, remember, Rabbi Meir will say, what do you do? Tanakama says what? Start from the beginning. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, pick up from where you left off. We'll say, what's Tanakama the Machlokes? How do you view the applications you already did? Rabbi Meir will say, we view those as if they don't exist. Like it never happened. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon say, no, they happened. They happened. That's how we could pick up. So we'll say, this is incredible. Gemara now wants to apply this to this Machlokes over here. Watch this. The Mitzora has to go ahead and bring in Asham. They shechted the Asham, but they shechted it not for Asham Mitzora. They shechted it for Ola and Shlamim. Rabbi Meir will say, no problem. Just bring another Asham. Why? How do we view that shechita of the Asham? What happened? How do we view it? As if it didn't occur. Didn't occur. You shechted an Asham Mitzora, the Shem Shlamim. It's as if it didn't occur, not a problem. Both Rabbi Lazar and Shimon hold that when something happens, you can't view it as if it didn't occur. It occurred. It occurred. You shechted an Asham Mitzora. You just messed it up. Now here is the problem. Look at Rashi. The problem is Rabbi saying it is only one Asham Mitzora per customer. Rashi says the Haksiv, I'm picking up back in the middle of that Rashi, Haksiv, Keves Echad, Asham Echad Amarti Lecha, Velo Shtei Ashamas. V'hacha Leka L'Dechus. Supposed to listen to this. This is incredible. See, according to Rabbi Meir, who says that when something gets messed up, you could view it as if it never occurred. Not a problem. If you mess up the Asham Mitzora, just bring another one. But Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, who say that when something gets disrupted in the middle, we don't discount what occurred. We pick up from where you left off. If you messed up your Asham Mitzora, we can't say that never happened. It happened. And the problem we'll say is, once you mess up your Asham Mitzora, it is one asham mitzora per customer. So we don't view it as if nothing ever happened. We view it as if you offered up a disqualified asham mitzora. In which case, pretty much controls over Shimon, you have no recourse. There is no way for the Nazir because again, dashing in the psukim, one asham per customer. Maskef Rav Chisda v'ha oso ksiv. But the pasuk says oso. Rashi says va'oso ksiv v'hekriv oso la'asham oso shunaf malug v'lo acher va'afil Rabbi Meir ein lo takana. Well, say the truth is, oso is a pretty specific word, indicating that whatever was shechted, that is what is to be used, and you can't bring a replacement. So it should be even a kasha according to Rabbi Meir, enochinami, it's a kasha. So Tanya Kavas said Rabbi Yochanan, supposed to say there's a Bryce that's a part of Rabbi Yochanan. Supposed to say this is really an incredible, a really incredible application of this machlokes. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to take the machlokes. Supposed to say, I just want to point out something amazing. What we're doing now is taking the machlokes between Rabbi Meir, the Tanakama, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, by Yom Kippur, where what happens if the blood service gets disrupted in the middle, and we're now applying it ultimately again to Metzora? What happens if you messed up the Asham Metzora? So Rabbi says, now watch this. Tanya Kavas say, Rabbi Yochanan. There's a Bryce that's a Rabbi Yochanan. Asham Metzora sheshachto shelo lishmo. If you shachted an Asham Metzora, shelo lishmo. Rabbi say again, shelo lishmo means you shecht it l'shem ola, l'shem shlamim, and what happens? Or you didn't do proper blood applications onto the metzora. We treat that disqualified asham as an ola for the mizbeach. And it requires accompanying nisachim. And you must bring another asham for the metzora. Rav Chisda will say, "My tzarich." What does tzarich mean? Tzarich ve'in lo takana. But say tzarich means you have to bring an asham. But what? But what? You can't. You can't. Why can't you? Because you're stuck on a technicality, right? You're stuck on a technicality. The technicality ultimately is that it's one carbon per customer. So you have to bring another asham, but you can't bring another asham. The Gemara says, 1 second. Vitani tana sarich ve'en lo takana. I will say, does the Gemara ever use verbiage like this? That sarich you have to, but in parentheses you can't? Do we ever use a lashon like that? To which the Gemara says, listen to this. Vatanya, nazir memorat. Well, so what happens if you have a bald nazir? Part of the conclusion of the neder naziros is a shaving of the nazir's head. Well, what do you do if you have a bald nazir? Beishamai omrim tzarich havaras tar. You still take the razor and you pull it and you go ahead and you shave his head. Beisil says the guy's bald. You don't need to go ahead and take a razor. There's no din of shaving his head if he has no hair. When Beishamai says you have to take the razor, what do they really mean? Sarich ve'ein lo takana. It means you have to, but what? But you can't. But you can't. Upliged Rabbi Pidas. Rabbi Pidas, Beishamai, Rabbi Elazar, Amru davar echad. And this argues Rabbi Pidas, because Rabbi Pidas says that Beishamai and Rabbi Elazar, they really said the same thing. Beishamai had the Amran, Beishamai is what we just quoted before. Rabbi Elazar says, Ein lo bohen yad, ubohen regel, ein lo tara olamis. Rabbi Elazar says, what happens if the coin doesn't have a thumb or doesn't have a big toe, which are the places where you have to go ahead and do the application? So he doesn't have tara. If he doesn't have the limb, the appendage, you can't go ahead and effect his tara. Rabbi Elazar Omer, nasun amakomo v'yotzer. Rabbi Elazar says, you place it on the place where the toe would have been, right? Where the thumb would have been, and that is going to have to be enough. Rabbi Shimon Omer, im nason al shel small yatsa. Rabbi Shimon says ultimately again, halacha l'maisa, if the metzora doesn't have a thumb, a right thumb or a right toe, you place it on the left hand and you're yotzi. So both say. So point over here that the Gemara is making is that halacha l'maisa, the Gemara is suggesting that the same machlokes that applies by disruption in the blood service. You have a disruption in the blood service. You bring a new animal, where do you pick up from? Do you pick up from where you left off? Do you start again? That same machlokes the Gemara is suggesting kind of trickles down into Nazirus and ultimately again into Tsaras. As I just point out over here, it turns out, it's not to conclude, but it turns out that the fundamental machlokes between the Tanakam Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon is whether or not once something is done, and then you can no longer continue in the process, have to start again. Do we still take into account what was done, or do we say what was done is counted as if it never occurred? And I'll just point out over here, this concept, this machlokes, represents a fundamental distinction in our life relationships as well. Herein lies the distinction between our relationship in Adam Lamakum and in Adam Lechavero. In a relationship, bein adam lechavero, whatever is done and cannot be undone. If you hurt someone, you offend someone, you upset someone, you could apologize, but at the end of the day, can you undo that which has been done? Never. Right? Anyone who's ever been hurt knows you could forgive, but you don't forget, right? You could move on, but the truth is it's natural to always then be guarded with that individual to some degree. You hurt me. So I'll say what's interesting is, so really bein adam lechavero kind of reflects the position of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. That Allah said that which is done always remains, and the goal is what, however, what's the goal in interpersonal relationships? What's the goal? Move on. You know, what's done is done. What's done is done, and it's always going to be there. There is no way to take that away, but we could build something new. But when it comes to bein adam l'makom, I will say, how do we pass with bein adam l'makom? Bein adam l'makom is Rabbi Meir, right? The beauty of our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam is that even if something was done, right? I messed up. According to Rabbi Meir, what do you do when the blood spills in the middle? What do you do when stuff happens in life? Start all over again. And it's as if the first thing that occurred never occurred. It's, with the Ribono Shel Olam, there really is a blank slate. People like to say in human relationships, let's make a blank slate. We know that's not really true. There's no blank slates in human relationships. There are do-overs, absolutely, but there's never really a blank slate. Human relationships, that's Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon. But the beauty of our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam ultimately is a blank slate. If I want to start again, I have that ability to do so. And Rabbi say, and with this I'll really end. It is so incredible that we're doing this daf today, because Rabbi say there is a Rabbi Meir day each and every month. And when's Rabbi Meir day each and every month? It's Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodeshim li'amcha nasata. The beauty of Rosh Chodesh, I will say, is a brand new beginning. The beauty of Rosh Chodesh is maybe I spilled the blood, right? Maybe I dropped the ball, right? And maybe I really messed up badly last month. It's possible, it's even probable that I did that. Rosh Chodeshim li'amcha nasata. You dropped the blood, you spilled the blood, you messed up the avodah last month. We paskin like Rabbi Meir when it comes to bein adam l'makom. We forget about what was, and we have the opportunity to start again. So we should be Zoche Meretz Hashem, Rosh Chodeshim li'amcha nasata, to actualize that new beginning this month, to forget about that which was spilled, and in Meretz Hashem embrace new possibilities. Shkach alongside.